Welcome to my Unit 3 presentation, where I will be developing my lesson plan, promoting cultural values through alphabet books. My lesson plan is developed for third grade students in the subject of English and language arts. My objective is to increase my students' knowledge of a world culture while also improving their skills in the areas of reading, writing, technology usage, and researching skills. We'll first talk through some very important components of building a lesson plan, from curriculum to standards to objectives, and even moving on to the ABCD model and the depth of knowledge wheel. So, as Hillary Clinton once said, it takes a village. What the village has done with curriculum has changed vastly through the years. For example, it wasn't until 1850 that curriculum was really a thing. Throughout the U.S., prior to 1850, there weren't really any textbooks. From that time, however, they've been largely used, widely with pros and cons. As the years went on and schools changed, by 2010, many states throughout the U.S. would adopt a Common Core curriculum. This happened for a lot of reasons, but one of those reasons is when students relocate between states, school administration can more easily identify where the student is and how to help that student move successfully through their current grade and to the next. We know that in addition to a standard written curriculum, there are other factors, if you will, that children draw from their education, like the informal, hidden, extra, and null curriculum. All very important factors. Each state has the opportunity to develop, of course, their own expectations with regard to teachers and students, what's appropriate for each grade level is identified through certain standards. We are in Alabama, and in Alabama, the platform website that's used to deliver these standards is called the Alabama Learning Exchange, or ALEX for short. These standards are clearly defined goals for public education, meaning this is the minimum expectation, what the student is expected to achieve and what the teacher is expected to ensure is covered adequately through lesson planning. The objective is the place where the teacher starts. When it comes to a lesson plan, we've got to begin with the end in mind. Objectives should be clearly defined, observable, and measurable student outcome. These will indicate learner progress toward the achievement of a particular educational goal, and it's the teacher's responsibility to develop this from start to finish in a lesson plan. In order to do this, the teacher can put into play an ABCD model. Each letter has different meaning to carry out the qualities of the objectives. A is audience, Simply put, who are you developing this lesson plan for? In this scenario, as I'm in early childhood education and my focus is preschool to third grade, this lesson plan is developed for third grade students. We move from audience to behavior. The behavior of the student is simply asking, what is the teacher wanting the student to do? How is the lesson plan designed? And it should be an overt, observable behavior. Next is C, which is condition. How? Under what circumstances will the learning occur? What will the student be given or already be expected to know to accomplish the learning? And lastly, degree. How much? How much will be accomplished? How well will the behavior need to be performed, and to what level? Does the teacher expect total mastery or only 80%, etc.? Of course, anytime a lesson plan is developed and a lesson is shared with a class, the next thing that comes into play is assessment. As we think about assessment, we think about the DOK wheel, or depth of knowledge. The depth of knowledge wheel provides us with an outline based on the level of the student that will allow us to assess what they've learned from the lesson. From recalling elements and details of story structure, such as sequence of events, character, plot, and setting, to formulating a routine problem given the data and conditions, or using voice appropriate to the purpose and audience, or perhaps even designing a mathematical model to inform and solve a practical or abstract situation. As we can see, the DOK wheel is pretty comprehensive. It allows us a great deal of information to work from, to assess from the beginning of a lesson to the end how well our student is doing. The big picture from my lesson. All of these components have been taken into consideration for the development of my lesson, where my students will be invited to create their own cultural journey and depict the same to an audience through multimedia sources. My grand plan. As I've shared, my learners are third grade English language arts students. That's my A for audience. My students will be within a group and they'll write and illustrate a cultural alphabet book based on their research. Groups will share their work with the class and invited guests during a diversity celebration. That's my B. That's what their behavior will be. After my students have embarked on a cultural research project, which includes reading a variety of alphabet books about world cultures, including D is for Tofu, an alphabet book of Chinese culture by Meiwan Shenkrak, they then select a culture to study and work in groups to conduct research into the history and symbols of their selected culture. That's my C. Condition. And lastly, the degree to which I would like for my students to master the material is a minimum of 80%, but of course, every teacher wants their student to make 100. And again, to reiterate, my objective is for this project to increase my students' knowledge of a world culture and improve their reading, writing, technology usage, and researching skills. Now, as to how I'll introduce my lesson, the fun part. I've selected a video from YouTube which depicts other third grade students and the process of them doing a very similar project. This will allow my students the encouragement of knowing that if another class of third grade kids can do this, they can too. It'll also provide them with some ideas. So we'll start on the whiteboard and we'll give my students the opportunity to see the work from another class with a very similar project. During reading time throughout the length of the project, which I expect to be somewhere around three weeks, I will use different reading resources that I've compiled from the 2020 Ultimate List of Diverse Children's Books. Assessment will take place through observation of the student's personal level of confidence, as well as the marked differences in progress in the areas that I've outlined. My students will need at least grade level foundations in reading, writing, research, and technology skills in order to meet the objective for this lesson. This lesson will be spread out over 3 weeks in 10, 20 to 30-minute sessions. The hook of the lesson will be using the whiteboard to visit different world cultures virtually. I will provide my students with their assignment sheet along with an overview of the research resources they may use. I'll invite them to select a culture and form their groups to begin their research. During the body of the lesson, I'll follow up with the students on the research they're conducting, and I'll gently guide them to collaborate as groups through their next steps. To the conclusion of the lesson, I will meet with group leaders to verify that their groups are on track and materials are developed and prepared for presentation. I obtained my lesson plan through Alex and additional materials for my lesson plan through readwritethink.org and hereweread.com. Of course, I took a great deal of information for building my lesson plan from the text, Your Introduction to Education, Explorations in Teaching by Sarah D. Powell, a Pearson text. This lesson is very exciting, and I'm sure that it can be reused over many school years and certainly have the opportunity to perfect it along the way. I love using a lesson plan that not only incorporates the ELA standards, but also creates the desire in the children to celebrate diversity. Thank you.